morning is Mr. DeLucia. Mr. DeLucia came to Hill in 1999. He is the Herbert B. Finnegan Chair of World Languages, Senior Master Teacher of Chinese, and head coach of the 2023 Maple Champion Boys Cross Country Team. He is a dorm parent in Upper School West, where he lives with his wife and two cats, Taco and Cypher, and has a daughter who was Hill class of 2013. Mr. DeLucia.
When I was in high school, I spoke in front of a group exactly one time. I had to give an oral report on the life of Sigmund Freud. It went like this. Sigmund Freud got sick and died. Thank you. And at which point, I ran back to my seat shaking. It's not that I didn't know a lot about Sigmund Freud. I actually still remember about 50 years ago, the weird look the librarian gave me when I checked out Freud's The Interpretation of Dreams, which along with many of the other books on the psychology shelf, I read cover to cover. I think I read all this stuff to try to figure out what was wrong with me. I had and still have a high degree of social anxiety, which in those days was just called shyness. I guess I was just born shy, and there was not much that I could do about it, even reading all those books on psychology and philosophy or religion. If we find ourselves to be a certain way, good or bad at something, then maybe we just have to accept it, or not. I wasn't good at languages either, even English. I struggled mightily in high school through a year of German, 2 years of French, barely passing. And when I graduated, I was ecstatic because now I would never have to take a foreign language course again in my life. I was devastated when I went to college and found that my prior language suffering was not sufficient. And I had another 2-year requirement to me. I postponed the inevitable for a year and then took Russian as a sophomore. Not the wisest choice for someone who's not good at languages. As my sophomore year was winding down and I took spring term Russian on pass-fail, I did get a B- and passed. A girl in my dorm joked that Chinese didn't have any grammar. Well, I didn't ace Chinese either, but I met my requirement, graduated from college, and then made the crazy decision to actually try to learn Chinese by studying in Taiwan for a year. I stayed 3 years, and the rest is history. What I primarily want to talk about and try to figure out is what is meant by the phrase, doing hard things, and how that can impact one's life. I remember one summer day during high school when I went running in the woods of eastern Connecticut. I flew along the dense trails and floated on rocks across streams and rivers, and some 4 hours later finished up about 31 miles. That was not hard. I had a great time out in nature by myself. Can't remember what I did the next day, but it was probably either another 8 or 10 miles or maybe 54 holes of golf, which also wasn't hard. It was fun. Or maybe it was only 36 holes of golf, 7 miles running, and 6 hours at the restaurant washing dishes. Either way, it was all good because none of these activities were socially demanding. Even playing golf was not very social. My friend Jim might play the first 18 with me, didn't talk much, and the remaining rounds were by myself. Growing up through elementary school, middle school, and even high school, I was extremely shy and avoided any significant social interaction that I could. But I liked sports, and I could mix it up with the best of them. Basketball allowed me to speak with my actions, and I spent 3 or 4 hours every day practicing in my driveway, usually alone, but sometimes with my little brother, who was 6 inches taller than me and much more athletic. And although I only played a week of high school basketball, since 2 of my classmates were also point guards and much better than me, I'd be riding the bench. Through sports, I learned to stand up to just about anybody. Sports had a big impact there. I had originally joined cross country just to get in shape for basketball. But at this point, it was not a hard choice to focus on running, which I found I was pretty good at. Don't know when I started to realize that the best things in life happened as a result of facing into your fears and doing the things that you personally found most difficult. I gradually did more things that I found truly hard, but at first it wasn't by design. After hitchhiking to Colorado when I was 20, the only job I could find was selling encyclopedias door to door. How can a shy kid sell an $800 set of encyclopedias to a stranger in 1979 when he could barely blurt out a few words? I worked with extroverts who could sell paper to a tree. And almost every evening when we got picked up, I felt like Charlie Brown on Halloween. They'd pull out a contract for a sale, sometimes two, and all I got was a rock. Somehow, I actually sold 5 sets that summer, developed a little bit of confidence, so while I didn't find my life calling, it stretched me and helped me to grow. That was hard. When I arrived in Taiwan 2 years later, I soon realized that in order to support myself, I would have to teach at an English cram school to a class of 20 to 25 students. I was terrified, but stuck it out. I needed the money. And the continuous panic attack feeling that I always had when speaking in front of people gradually diminished to bearable levels. I still have it, but after 42 years, well, I still have it. It's hard, but I can bear it, enough possibly to give a chapel talk for the first time in my 25th year at Hill. I worked really hard at Chinese in those early months in Taiwan. It was difficult because I made myself talk to people in Chinese and was essentially doing 2 of the hardest things I could do simultaneously. I almost gave up about 4 months in, thinking I would never be successful at this quest. But then one day I woke up and realized I'd been dreaming in Chinese. No, it's not that dramatic. It wasn't instantaneous, but just as things started to get the darkest, a little bit of light started to shine through, and it seemed that Chinese was starting to click. Now, I lived in China. I lived with a Chinese college student in 3 different apartments over 2 years. And at one point, he said he was leaving, and either I could find 2 new roommates, or I could move out, and he would take care of the lease. We were riding in a taxi at that point, and I noticed some really cool New Age music on the radio. And I asked my housemate who it was. He said it was Kitaro, a Japanese New Age musician who was coming to Taiwan to give a concert soon. I said, let's go, but he said we'd never get tickets. The next day, another friend came by and asked to use my phone. I overheard him say, how many Kitaro tickets do you want? So I went to the concert with that friend, his German friend, and 2 women who had just arrived from Germany who needed a place to live. They came, they saw my place, but then they called me up the next day to say they couldn't take it because they found a better one. However, they invited me to live in a house with them in the mountains south of Taipei City, about 30, 40 minutes away. They didn't know any Chinese, so I'd be the one dealing with the landlord and the utility payments. So a series of coincidences, taking a few risks, none of them difficult, led to my arrival at this new part of Taiwan. At the new residence, there was a bus every hour from this mountainside community to the city. One day, sitting in front of the bus, I saw a young lady get on the bus who rocked my world, but didn't notice me. Many days passed until late October 1983, exactly 40 years ago this week, when she sat across the aisle from me. I wanted to talk to her, but I didn't know what to say, and I was really nervous. I finally blurted out in Chinese, "Do you know where to pay the utility bill?" And she looked up from her book, said no, and went back to reading. I'd given it my best shot, and now I would probably never talk to her again. Turns out that we both lived uphill from the station, and as we were walking up that first switchback, I gathered up the nerve to talk to her again, and I'm glad I did. We talked many times on the 4 switchbacks up the hill, followed by a long wooded staircase that led to my house, and her house was just past mine. Less than 6 months later, I proposed to her at the base of those stairs. So Mrs. D and I will be celebrating our 40th anniversary next year. So actually, very little has changed with my social anxiety since high school. But after facing into it tens of thousands of times, it probably doesn't seem like I'm hideously nervous inside, but I am. For 3 minutes before I speak at a meeting, and for 3 minutes after. My hand is shaking so much that I don't pick up my coffee for fear of spilling it. Now my colleagues will of course be watching me next time at the academic council meeting, see if what I'm doing before and after I speak. I recognize many times in my life when pushing myself to do something in my own zone of discomfort led to a richer life. And as some of you know, I'm happy to share those stories at great length. I love people, all people, and my time on this planet is just too short to let my communication difficulties stand in the way of experiencing all that humanity has to offer. It would not be hard to spend all my time jogging in the woods alone, hanging out at home with Mrs. D and our cats, Papu and Cypher, as you heard. But every interaction, every joke or smile, every deep conversation is deeply meaningful. And at the end of the day, or at the end of a life, that's really all that matters. Take good chances. Don't just follow the path of least resistance, because you'll often find that the biggest rewards come when you go against the grain, especially when you're doing something that's hard for you. I'd like to end with a prayer by St. Francis of Assisi, for no other reason than that he liked animals and did hard things. I think we need a little bit more of this these days. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness,